Women who inspire lasting love aren't usually the ones who pour every ounce of themselves into a relationship. They aren't constantly sending the first message, making themselves available every second of the day, or sacrificing their own needs just to prove how much they care. Instead, they hold on to one powerful boundary that completely changes how a man sees them. That single boundary shifts you from being someone he simply enjoys spending time with into someone he truly fears losing. For years, you've probably been taught that love is measured by sacrifice, by giving endlessly, and by proving your value through devotion. But what if that belief has actually been pushing love further away? What if the very thing keeping you heartbroken isn't that you're giving too little, but that you're giving away the one thing that creates lasting attraction? The truth has far less to do with what you offer and far more to do with what you protect. This isn't about manipulation or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about understanding a psychological principle that naturally changes the way a man bonds with you. Throughout this video, you'll discover the boundary that effortlessly magnetic women maintain, often without even realizing it. It's the difference between being appreciated and being deeply valued. You'll also learn why this boundary inspires a man to pursue you instead of becoming comfortable, how to apply it without pushing away a genuinely good partner, and why mastering this one shift can make you far more attractive to emotionally healthy, confident men. So settle in, remove anything distracting your attention, and stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear challenges almost everything you've been taught about relationships, and yet it's a pattern that appears again and again in real life. One of the biggest misunderstandings about love is believing that closeness alone creates deep attachment. Many women assume that if they share everything, remain constantly available, and always say yes, a man's feelings will naturally continue growing. It sounds logical, but attraction doesn't always follow logic. The uncomfortable reality is that lasting romantic attachment often develops through emotional tension rather than complete comfort. While many women feel more connected through consistent closeness and reassurance, men often experience attraction differently. Their psychology is naturally drawn toward earning, pursuing, and investing in something they genuinely value. When everything is handed to them effortlessly, there is often less emotional engagement, not more. If every mystery disappears, every challenge is removed, and every opportunity is guaranteed, excitement begins to fade. It's not because men dislike kindness or consistency. It's because the human mind, especially in attraction, often values what requires meaningful effort rather than what arrives without investment. Take a moment to think about the men you've seen who seem completely captivated by one particular woman. More often than not, she wasn't the person who dropped everything whenever he called or rearranged her entire life around his schedule. She wasn't desperately trying to make every moment convenient for him. Instead, she had standards, priorities, and a fulfilling life that existed before he entered it. He had to earn his place within that world instead of becoming its center overnight. Psychologists often describe this as the scarcity principle, the idea that people naturally assign greater value to things that aren't instantly available or easily obtained. This pattern isn't limited to romance. It appears throughout human behavior. When someone invests their time, energy, and emotions into achieving something meaningful, they begin to value it even more. As a man consistently invests in knowing you, impressing you, and building something with you, his own effort strengthens the emotional importance you hold in his mind. What makes this dynamic so fascinating is that the pursuit itself changes how he thinks. Every time he chooses to meet your standards instead of expecting you to lower them, every time he invests genuine effort to earn your attention, and every time he continues showing up despite small challenges, he strengthens his own emotional commitment. People naturally become more attached to what they've invested in because their minds begin justifying that investment. This is one reason why constantly overgiving can quietly work against long-term attraction. It isn't because those women aren't worthy of deep love, it's because they've unknowingly removed the process that allows emotional investment to grow. By becoming endlessly available, endlessly accommodating, and completely predictable, they eliminate the opportunity for meaningful pursuit. Meanwhile, the woman who values herself, maintains healthy boundaries, and continues living a rich, independent life creates an entirely different emotional experience. She isn't chasing validation because she already values herself, and that quiet confidence often becomes incredibly compelling. Many people misunderstand this idea and assume it means acting cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable. That's not what creates healthy attraction. Playing games eventually destroys trust. The real difference lies in protecting your own value instead of constantly proving it. It means honoring your standards, respecting your own time, and refusing to abandon your identity simply to keep someone interested. Ironically, those very qualities often make someone even more attractive. Healthy men don't lose interest because a woman has boundaries. They respect them. The goal isn't to create unnecessary distance, but to preserve your individuality while allowing a relationship to grow naturally. When you stop trying to convince someone to choose you and instead continue choosing yourself alongside the relationship, the entire dynamic changes. You're no longer asking for your worth to be recognized because your actions already demonstrate that you know it. One of the hardest truths about relationships is that they rarely fall apart because love suddenly disappears. More often, they slowly weaken because one partner sacrifices so much of themselves that the relationship loses its balance. In many cases, that person is the woman who gradually reshapes her life around his routine, his preferences, and his emotional needs. She believes that greater devotion will naturally inspire greater love. Yet the opposite often happens. As she gives up more of herself, his attraction quietly begins fading. This isn't necessarily because he lacks compassion or appreciation. Instead, her behavior unintentionally communicates that she has few personal boundaries, limited priorities outside the relationship, and no life that exists independently from him. Rather than making him feel cherished, it can place an invisible emotional weight on his shoulders that slowly transforms excitement into pressure. Think back to the beginning of most relationships. The woman who first captured his attention had her own passions, friendships, ambitions, and routines. She wasn't waiting for someone else to complete her life because her life already had meaning. Spending time together felt exciting because it was a choice, not an obligation. But over time, many women unintentionally begin canceling personal plans whenever he becomes available. Their dreams become quieter, while his goals take center stage. Their own identity slowly fades into the background as the relationship becomes their primary source of fulfillment. Without realizing it, they replace the vibrant, confident woman he admired with someone whose happiness depends almost entirely on his presence. Deep inside, most emotionally mature men recognize the difference between genuine love and emotional dependence. They may not always explain it, but they feel it. And that's often when the emotional distance begins, leaving her wondering what changed when, in reality, she simply gave away too much of herself. The biggest mistake many women make is believing that his happiness should always come before their own. It sounds loving, even noble, but when this becomes a habit, attraction often begins to fade. Love without limits may seem beautiful in theory, yet in reality, it can slowly remove the very spark that keeps a relationship alive. Without healthy boundaries, there is no emotional tension. Without that tension, anticipation disappears, and when anticipation fades, passion can quietly turn into comfort without excitement. Even more damaging is what happens inside you. Every time you ignore your own needs, compromise your values, or repeatedly put yourself last, you begin losing the respect you have for yourself. Once that happens, it's difficult to expect someone else to consistently honor and value you the way you deserve. Healthy love isn't built on self-sacrifice alone. It also requires protecting your own identity. The loss of self-respect rarely happens all at once. It appears through dozens of small decisions that slowly reshape who you are. It shows up in the way you criticize yourself, excuse behavior that hurts you, or stay silent simply to avoid conflict. It appears every time you make yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Although these actions often go unspoken, they create an energy that other people naturally notice. A man may not consciously recognize every detail, but he can often sense when a woman no longer values herself. Ironically, this doesn't encourage him to treasure her more. In many cases, it has the opposite effect. Deep down, everyone is drawn toward people who carry themselves with quiet confidence and self-worth. Lasting relationships aren't sustained by endless giving alone. They thrive when both people respect one another, and genuine respect can only grow where healthy personal boundaries exist. The strongest relationships are built on an unspoken understanding that love should never require someone to lose themselves. A healthy boundary quietly says, "I care deeply about you, but I won't abandon who I am to keep this relationship." That simple mindset changes everything. It doesn't only influence how a man sees you, it transforms how you see yourself. As your confidence grows, your presence naturally changes. You stop seeking validation because you already recognize your own value. That inner shift is what people often describe as magnetism. It's not created through manipulation or clever dating strategies. It comes from living in alignment with your own standards. When you genuinely believe your needs, dreams, and values matter, other people begin responding to you differently because your actions consistently reinforce that belief. Confidence built on self-respect is far more attractive than confidence built on constant reassurance from someone else. Many people misunderstand the purpose of boundaries. They imagine them as emotional walls designed to keep others at a distance, but healthy boundaries serve an entirely different purpose. They're not barriers, they're guidelines that show people how to treat you with care and respect. They aren't meant to punish, reject, or control anyone. Instead, they create the conditions where love can remain healthy over time. Strong boundaries quietly communicate that your time, attention, and emotional energy have value. They remind others that closeness isn't something to be taken for granted, but something built through trust, consistency, and mutual effort. Surprisingly, this doesn't discourage emotionally mature men. It often has the opposite effect. A man who genuinely wants a meaningful relationship usually appreciates knowing that the woman he's pursuing has standards, values herself, and expects the relationship to be built on mutual respect rather than convenience. There is something deeply satisfying about earning something meaningful. Whether it's a career you've worked hard for, an achievement you've spent years pursuing, or the respect you've gained through consistent effort, the things that require investment usually become the things we appreciate most. Relationships often follow a similar pattern. When someone must consistently show character, reliability, and emotional maturity to build a connection, that relationship naturally carries greater value. This is why women who maintain their individuality often leave a lasting impression. They don't stop loving wholeheartedly, but they never sacrifice their identity in the process. They give generously while also expecting healthy reciprocity. They make space for the right person without making themselves endlessly available to everyone. Their independence isn't about creating distance. It's about preserving the life, purpose, and confidence that made them attractive long before the relationship even began. Healthy boundaries also create something many people overlook: emotional security. Some women believe that saying yes to everything, being constantly available, and never expressing limits will make a man feel safe. Yet unlimited access without clear expectations can sometimes create uncertainty instead. When there are no standards, no consistency, and no understanding of what is acceptable, both people can end up feeling confused about where they stand. Clear boundaries remove that uncertainty. They create honesty, predictability, and trust because each person understands what the other values and expects. Rather than forcing someone to guess how to make the relationship work, boundaries provide a healthy framework that makes loving each other easier. Most importantly, boundaries are never only about protecting yourself from someone else. They're about protecting your own confidence, preserving your self-respect, and ensuring that the person you become in love is still the person you're proud to be. That confidence creates a powerful cycle where self-worth strengthens attraction. Attraction encourages respect, and respect allows love to continue growing instead of slowly fading away. The boundary I'm about to share isn't difficult to understand, but its impact can completely change the way your relationships unfold. In many ways, it's the foundation that supports every other healthy habit in love. Once you genuinely embrace it, so many confusing situations suddenly begin to make sense. This single principle doesn't just influence how a man responds to you, it changes how you value yourself. Instead of creating a relationship built on obligation or emotional dependence, it encourages genuine desire, mutual respect, and authentic pursuit. It's the difference between constantly trying to earn someone's attention and naturally inspiring them to invest in you. When you begin living by this mindset, you stop chasing validation and start creating relationships where appreciation grows naturally because both people are choosing each other instead of one person carrying the entire emotional weight. The boundary is simple to say, but powerful to practice. Never make someone your highest priority if they consistently treat you like one of many options. At first, it may sound obvious, yet many women unknowingly do the opposite. Out of love and good intentions, they place a man at the center of their lives while quietly accepting a secondary place in his. They reorganize their schedules around his availability, constantly adjust their plans, and pour emotional energy into someone who hasn't shown the same level of commitment. Over time, this creates an imbalance that slowly weakens attraction and self-respect. Healthy relationships aren't built when one person continually overextends themselves while the other contributes only when it's convenient. Mutual effort creates stability, while one-sided investment usually creates disappointment. Respecting this boundary simply means refusing to give more emotional priority than you're consistently receiving. Living by this principle means learning to match someone's level of investment instead of constantly exceeding it. If his communication is inconsistent, you don't compensate by doubling your effort. If he only reaches out when his schedule is clear, you don't repeatedly sacrifice your own commitments to accommodate him. If he behaves as though you're one possibility among many, you don't act as though he's the only person who matters. This isn't about retaliation or keeping score. It's about maintaining emotional balance and allowing someone's actions to reveal the true level of their interest. When you stop overgiving, you create space for honesty. Either he notices your value and naturally increases his effort, or he remains exactly the same. Both outcomes provide clarity. Instead of endlessly wondering where you stand, you finally receive an answer through his behavior rather than his words. One of two things usually happens when you stop carrying the relationship by yourself. A man who genuinely values you often responds by becoming more intentional. He reaches out more consistently, invests greater effort, and begins treating the connection with the importance it deserves because he realizes your attention is something meaningful, not guaranteed. On the other hand, if he quietly disappears once you stop doing all the work, that outcome is equally valuable. It reveals that his interest depended more on your constant effort than on a sincere desire to build something together. While that realization may hurt at first, it ultimately protects you from investing months or even years into someone who was never willing to meet you halfway. Sometimes the greatest gift a boundary gives you isn't a stronger relationship. It's the clarity to recognize when someone isn't capable of offering one. This boundary doesn't only change how other people behave, it transforms your own mindset in remarkable ways. The moment you stop making someone your primary focus while receiving very little in return, you naturally begin redirecting that energy back into yourself. You invest in your goals, friendships, passions, health, and personal growth instead of constantly wondering whether someone else will choose you. Ironically, that shift often makes you far more attractive. People are naturally drawn toward those who already have a meaningful life instead of waiting for someone else to create one for them. A woman who enjoys her own life carries a quiet confidence that's difficult to imitate. She isn't seeking constant reassurance because her happiness doesn't depend entirely on another person's attention. That confidence creates an energy that many people find deeply compelling because it reflects genuine emotional security. As you continue living by this standard, you stop becoming the person who's endlessly available, endlessly accommodating, and always placing someone else's needs ahead of your own. Instead, you become intentional with your time, protective of your emotional energy, and confident in your standards. Your attention becomes valuable precisely because it isn't given away without thought. The beautiful result is that you begin attracting people who naturally want to treat you as a priority because you've stopped accepting anything less. You no longer settle for occasional effort or inconsistent affection. Instead, you make room for relationships built on equal commitment, mutual respect, and shared investment. This isn't about being demanding or difficult. It's about recognizing your own worth and refusing to shrink your expectations simply to keep someone around. Healthy love has never been about convincing someone to value you. It has always been about choosing relationships where that value is recognized willingly. When you consistently live according to this boundary, something important begins happening in a man's mind. He no longer sees your attention as something that's automatically available whenever he wants it. Instead, he starts recognizing that your time, affection, and trust carry real value because they must be earned through consistency and genuine effort. That realization often inspires him to show up differently if he's truly interested. More importantly, it protects you from chasing people who are never willing to meet you with the same level of commitment. Understanding this principle is only the beginning, though. The real transformation comes when you apply it in everyday situations. Once you begin matching effort instead of constantly exceeding it, people's behavior starts revealing their true intentions. Some will move closer because they value what they're building with you, while others will drift away because they were comfortable receiving far more than they were ever willing to give. Either way, you finally gain the clarity needed to build healthier, stronger relationships. When you begin living by this boundary, you'll quickly notice that people's behavior starts revealing their true intentions. If a man genuinely cares about you but has simply become comfortable, you'll often see him raise his level of effort. He'll initiate conversations more naturally, make clearer plans, and become intentional about spending time with you because he realizes your attention isn't something he can assume will always be there. That's a healthy response because it shows he's willing to invest in keeping the connection strong. On the other hand, some men won't respond the same way. Those who mainly appreciated the convenience of your endless availability may become frustrated when you stop giving more than you receive. They may accuse you of changing or playing games. In reality, that reaction often says more about their expectations than it does about your behavior. Someone who resents your boundaries was likely benefiting from your lack of them. You'll also begin noticing changes that have nothing to do with him and everything to do with you. Once you stop pouring all your emotional energy into someone who isn't matching your effort, you suddenly have space to invest in your own life again. Your confidence starts growing because your happiness is no longer tied to another person's responses. You reconnect with hobbies you once neglected, spend more quality time with friends, pursue goals that excite you, and gradually become the version of yourself that existed before you made someone else the center of your world. People around you will often notice the difference before you do. They'll comment on how much lighter, happier, or more confident you seem. That renewed sense of purpose naturally changes your presence. And without trying to impress anyone, you become far more attractive because you're genuinely fulfilled instead of constantly seeking validation. Something else begins to happen as well. When your attention is no longer completely consumed by one person, you naturally become more open to the opportunities and people around you. You notice conversations you might have ignored before. New friendships form more easily. Men who may have assumed you were emotionally unavailable begin showing genuine interest. It's not because you've changed who you are overnight, it's because your energy has shifted. Instead of focusing all your attention on someone who offers very little in return, you're engaging with life again. That openness creates possibilities that simply weren't visible when all your emotional resources were directed toward one uncertain relationship. Perhaps the most rewarding part is that you begin attracting people who are genuinely looking for a balanced partnership rather than someone who will endlessly overgive. By refusing to accept being treated like an option, you naturally invite relationships where mutual priority becomes the standard instead of the exception. This boundary, however, only works when it's consistent. It can't become something you practice for a few days before abandoning the moment someone gives you a little extra attention. Healthy standards only have meaning when they remain steady over time. A man who truly respects you needs to see that your values aren't temporary reactions or tests designed to provoke him. They're simply part of who you are. Many people misunderstand boundaries and assume they're meant to punish someone or withhold affection. That's never the goal. Healthy boundaries create balance, not distance. They encourage both people to contribute emotionally, instead of allowing one partner to carry the relationship alone. When each person invests equally in each other's happiness, trust deepens, resentment fades, and neither person feels taken for granted because both have chosen to consistently show up for the relationship. When two people operate from this place of mutual respect, the relationship becomes far more stable. There is less need for power struggles because neither person is constantly trying to earn what should already be freely given. Appreciation remains alive because both partners recognize the value of what they've built together. Instead of surviving on occasional attention or inconsistent affection, the relationship grows through shared effort and intentional choices. A healthy partner won't be intimidated by your standards. In fact, he'll often admire them because they demonstrate self-respect, emotional maturity, and confidence. Knowing that you don't simply give your heart to anyone makes your commitment feel even more meaningful. He understands that being chosen by someone who values herself is something to appreciate rather than something to take for granted. As this boundary begins shaping your relationships, you'll notice several subtle signs that it's working. One of the first is greater consistency. Rather than hearing from him only when he's bored or lonely, his communication becomes more thoughtful and reliable. Instead of sending random late-night messages or making last-minute plans, he begins reaching out at appropriate times and planning ahead because he recognizes that your schedule and commitments matter. You'll also notice increased effort. Conversations become more meaningful, dates become more intentional, and he pays closer attention to the little details that matter to you. None of this happens because you've manipulated him into changing. It happens because people naturally invest more carefully in relationships they truly value. Respect follows that investment. He begins considering your time, your feelings, and your priorities instead of assuming you'll always adjust yours around his. Perhaps the clearest sign of all is that the pursuit becomes mutual instead of one-sided. When you stop carrying every conversation, making every plan, and constantly initiating contact, the right man begins meeting you halfway. He reaches out because he wants to hear from you, plans time together because he values your company, and willingly shares the emotional responsibility of building the relationship. That balance is what healthy love looks like. Before we finish, I'd love to know what resonated with you the most. Which boundary do you feel ready to protect? And what old pattern are you determined to leave behind? Your experience could encourage someone else who's learning to value themselves again. If this message gave you a new perspective, brought you clarity, or reminded you of your own worth, share it with someone who may need the same encouragement. And remember this above everything else. You are never asking for too much when you ask for mutual respect, consistent effort, and genuine love. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It is the beginning of every healthy relationship you'll ever have. When you make yourself a priority, the right person won't see your standards as an obstacle. They'll see them as the reason you're worth choosing every single day.